Welcome everybody to another episode of Learn Biz. I'm with Ryan Murray. I'm Ethan Migliori. I like the change of apparel today. Usually I'm the one that's a little bit more formal, and
my t-shirt was dirty. I mean, what can I say?
And I get to be a little bit more casual today. Kind of nice change, but
I'm going out on a date with my wife.
Good for you.
And
good for you. What did you do wrong?
Nothing. She invited me.
Oh, I get it. Hey Ryan, since you don't take me out, can I take you out tonight? You're never gonna live this one down.
Oh,
well,
shoot.
Back to the subject. Before
we have a subject.
Before we,
I mean, today the tone is, despite my appearance of being a little bit more dressed up, the tone is very laid back. We're definitely going to be on the sideline side of things, just having a side conversation. Well,
that's good.
It is good. We're going to have fun today.
Good. I know we wanted to talk. Well,
are you changing the subject on me already?
Maybe, I don't know.
All right.
We're about to find out.
Let's see where this goes, okay?
So I think we were going to talk a little bit about, there's a term that we hear all the time in business, especially with HR. I'm let me say this and then I'll go back to my
I'm not saying anything right now.
Called Quid Pro Quo,
Uh-huh.
which is kind of, this for that or something for something. And a lot of times right now, HR has made that such a negative connotation in so many organizations that you go into that when you hear that term, you just go, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm a fan of, I saw a shirt the other day that a company was promoting. It said defund HR on the shirt. So I'm kind of a fan of that shirt.
So I should put it out there right off the bat. We're going to just, this is free form, very opinionated. If you want to roast us in the comments, you can go ahead and roast us in the comments. That's fine. But just know that we're saying what we think. Usually we try and find some good articles or base it off of
sound
data,
business principles with data.
And I'm not gonna argue that this isn't good advice, but I am going to put it in the category of advice.
This would be the conversation we're going to have if we were driving in a truck going on a road trip somewhere.
Pretty much, yeah. This is just throwing out opinions back and forth. And honestly, when I started talking to you about the quid pro quo, it was interesting because I said, I want to talk about quid pro quo. And you immediately went, you're like, well, okay, just the negative side. I'm like, no, the positive side. You're like, oh,
right.
That's interesting, because most people, it's received such a negative connotation that...
that's why I support defund HR.
Maybe we're going to spin off on what HR should be. So,
okay.
Okay.
Well, and the bigger the organization gets, and this is the last thing I'll say about defund HR.
No. I'm going down this road.
The bigger the organization gets, the worse HR becomes. They literally become a police.
So,
and that's not their role.
I had a friend. She was in HR. And it was in a hospital system, so dealing with doctors and all of the admin and the nurses, and she transferred from a very large hospital network, one of the biggest in the state actually, to a much smaller regional hospital. And I was just talking to her once, and she's like, "I could write a book about everything that went on." She's like, minus that for confidentiality and professionalism, I can't share any of this, but it's like, and I'm trying to remember exactly what she was going to call it. It was something like drugs, sex, and extortion. Just, it was, and I'm like, oh, you've got a couple stories? She's like, oh, no. When I say I could write a book,
I'm sure there were lots.
I could write a book, and it was funny. But so We're sidelined. We can go wherever we want. I'm going to go there. HR in small businesses is weird.
It kind of is.
Everyone thinks they have to have it. I don't know that you have to. I mean, there are some things that have to happen. When someone gets hired, they need an offer letter. If there's some sort of, termination or corrective action, has to be handled. I don't know that it has to be handled by an HR position. It could be handled by a supervisor. I've seen CEOs that sort of step. When CEOs step in, they tend to take it Maverick style. It's my company, and this is what we do.
Yeah.
Again, not basing this on data. This is observation of CEOs that I've worked with, and I'm not convinced.
Well, my problem that I have a hard time with is that who's ever in HR, like an HR supervisor, an HR rep, should be the most neutral party in the business.
Which is almost impossible at a small business.
Right, exactly. Because they need to be, too often they feel like, well, I have to defend the business so I don't get in trouble with my boss, right?
Yeah.
So they tend to default there, even though there was an injustice done that they should have actually said, no, you can't do this as a business. They tend not to be neutral when you get into big organizations.
Well, okay, here's another thing that I'm going to point out. And man, we're going down the rabbit hole, and it's good. I'm going to have fun with it. Yeah. So friends in small businesses. So in larger companies, it's a little bit easier to have friends because you can go to a different department or a different building even, and you still might connect with them at the company Christmas party, and the fact that you work at the same place, but there's really no boundaries that get crossed. You get into a small business, even a business. So if you're super small, if you're like a half a dozen people working in this company, you kind of just end up naturally being friends, which I'm not convinced is the best thing for the company. I've seen it work. I've seen it be disastrous.
Right.
But when you get into these companies that have 20, 30, 40 employees, the problem is you've got the CEO, the ownership level, then you've got the management level, and then you've got like the employee level. Yeah. And then you've got kind of this sub-employee level that might be contract employees or part-time employees or something like that. And the second that you have a supervisor that is now friends with an employee, even if it's in a different department, because you're sitting in management meeting and you're talking about all of the problems happening in the company, and you're hearing all the problems that your friend is causing in this other department. And I personally think it's better to put boundaries in place, and the reason I'm bringing this up is to say, okay, so now you have HR, they're supposed to be neutral, i.e. you don't get to be friends with anybody. Right. And as human beings, we use business. Business to adults is like school to children. It's where you meet your schoolmates, your classmates, your friends. Yeah. And if you are not allowed to make friends at work, it's really difficult to make friends in other. I mean, you can get online and find groups that have like or shared interests, but I don't know that works as well.
No, but this is, I mean, I know it wasn't intended, but your scenario you just gave is the reason why quid pro quo gets such a bad rap.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
That scenario of supervisor, we have a lot of things in common with one of my subordinates. So we just naturally like each other. We work well together, and all of a sudden a position comes open, right? And and it's not necessarily that I did something for something per se, but I naturally hire them into this position, right? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden I have someone saying, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I was more qualified, or I was as qualified and I didn't get the opportunity. Mm-hmm. What's going on behind the scenes? When the reality is that's the weird thing about quid pro quo is that you have to be able to show that there was something in exchange, or I like the word you use, extortion, you're going to do this one or else.
Right.
But too many times that doesn't really play out as much as naturally we gravitate to people who are similar in taste, demeanor, hobbies, etc. Right? And so that's who we gravitate to and bring on. And all of a sudden the person who doesn't quite fit that same culture or style or hobbies that we have now feels like something's going on. Something's fishy.
And this is interesting because in business, from an HR perspective, sexual harassment is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And dating oftentimes is clearly stated as no.
Yeah.
Like you cannot date anyone that you have any authority over.
That's right.
But it's interesting because they don't put the same limitations on friends.
No.
They don't say, hey, you can't go hang out on the weekend with... and I get that dating has another layer, and this is a clean show, so I'll just say another layer. But dating has another layer to it. But oftentimes the relationship or the bond can be just as strong between friends as it can be between someone that you're dating.
Well, but here's the next thing that I know that then you chase a squirrel for just a minute, but with like nepotism, hiring a family and things like that. But here's what I make this strong argument that you don't get it, that if my family hasn't lived around me for years and I see them once a year, I get that they're family, but my friends are more family than some family.
Yeah.
Right? And I can hire that friend all day long and show whatever favoritism I want to him, and there's no penalty.
Yeah.
Right?
And so it's interesting. Now, okay, I want to take quid pro quo and take it to another layer. And I want to talk about the company, the owner-employee relationship to the customer. And you think about customers,
right?
Where are you coming up with your customers? Well, I don't care what business you're in. There's a level of networking that happens. And some people hate it because they feel pressured to do friends and family discounts. Right. They feel an obligation and they're like, oh crap, if something goes wrong, they're going to go above and beyond on a warranty that normally they wouldn't do. And I'm kind of that way where I've got some situations of some people that I've done trainings for, and we become friends, and it makes it very difficult. In fact, it's pretty funny because I've got this one, and I'm going to call her a friend because she really is a good friend. I'll call her outside, like I'll call her on her cell phone outside of doing any trainings for her, and just kind of see what's going on. And I'm not doing it to try and drum up business. Yeah. We just legitimately have become friends. But then when I have to invoice her, and so I'm always under invoicing because I'm like, well, and then she gets mad at me and she's like, okay, come on, don't under invoice. And she like overdoes it. And it's this weird dance of, neither of us know where to put it. And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. And, in my case, it does work out with her, but I don't know. We show favoritism. Human beings show favoritism. And anyone thinks that they can get rid of that through legislation or get rid of that through a form or an agreement, or you can sign anything that you want. You still will show favoritism. It is human nature. And you can't get away from that. That's like saying, okay, when you work here, you're not allowed to breathe anymore. Sorry, doesn't work.
And that's the thing that when we talk about the whole concept of this idea of something for something is that I want to first get rid of the negative connotation that HR has put on it.
Okay.
Because that's how they always sell. I mean, whenever you hear that word, the first thing you think is, you get a raise because you had sex with me, right?
Yeah.
That's the number one thing that they just preach. And so that's what they've turned it into. And I'm like, no, that happens so rare, honestly, that I don't even know why it's part of the discussion. But that's what they make it, right? So the whole idea that the concept of and I'm going to use the whole, if we have boats in the bay and the water comes up, all the boats come up, right?
Yeah.
The water benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the initial concept behind this idea that, hey, you know what? If we can have an arrangement that's better for both of us, why wouldn't we do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That it wasn't a negative connotation. It was a positive one that, you know what? Hey, you have ships and I have some grain. Can we have a partnership where we benefit from this one? And yeah, I get some benefit, you get some benefit out of this, but in the end, we both are significantly better from that arrangement.
But see, the problem is, again, talking about human nature, humans are jealous beings.
That's right.
And the second that, so I've got ships and you've got grain, and we come up with an arrangement that benefits both of us. Well, the person that doesn't have anything to do with the harbor, right. They're the school teacher, and they're looking and seeing that we're both benefiting from this, and all of a sudden they're jealous, and they're like, well, wait a second, I teach your kids, so therefore I should get a cut of this. It's like, well, why? And that's what happens a lot of times is in businesses, and I disagree with this. I think this goal of making things fair actually just hurts the greater good. I think that more people are harmed when you try and make things fair. So I was talking with someone recently, and they just went through the interview process. And they were really frustrated with the interview process. And I told them, I'm like, well, it's just because that's the way the interview has to go. It's so canned. Like, you have organizations, especially if you get into, state organizations, government of any kind. Some
larger corporations.
Yeah. They're going to ask the exact same questions.
It's overstructured.
And so I'm just like, look, you just got to realize that's what it is, because they felt like, they're like, well, none of my strengths really showed. I'm like, that's because you're not allowed to show your strengths, but because you're not allowed to show your strengths, someone else isn't allowed to show their strengths. And
yeah, that's right.
And so this whole idea of let's make it all fair, let's make interviews fair, let's make it that raises are always fair. I honestly think that it actually hurts more people. It does make it fair, but anytime you make anything equal, you always have to go to the lowest common denominator, not the highest denominator.
Right. Yeah. Another one I was thinking is, you talked about this idea of it, was that in a business organization, too often we have a hard time of separating our business life and friendship from personal life and friendship, right?
Yeah.
That, hey, you know what? I'm going to take you fishing to one of my favorite fishing spots, and tomorrow it's okay if I come in a little bit late, right?
Right.
I see a lot of that happening indirectly and unintentionally. That because the friendship goes outside of work, that, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go and take you to one of my favorite things, but at the same time, then I expect at work you're more lenient with me, right? And that's where I think you see the most abuse of this concept, instead of, how larger HR organizations try to push it. And so that would be another one I'd watch out for and tell people that, manage the relationship at work so that people understand, look, if I chew you out a little bit here at work, it doesn't mean I hate you in my personal life. And if you can't have the maturity to separate those sometimes, and also realize that, hey, you know what, if I do go out and do an activity outside of work, okay, and something then goes wrong at work and I chew you out, it just is the nature of the beast, and it doesn't affect the fact that we're friends here and sometimes we have to take corrective action over here.
But I've not come across a person yet who makes a comment like, don't criticize me because I can't handle it. Everyone's always making comments like, oh, you can tell me honestly, I can handle it. Or, we can separate our personal life and our professional life. Everyone wants to think that is how they are.
Yeah.
And the reality is
it's hard.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And there are people who do a really bad job at it, and then there are people who do a kind of bad job at it. I'm not putting anyone in the category that they do a good job at it, because what happens is you have someone, even if you don't go fishing with them, and you say, okay, look, we're not getting together. We're going to, we're going to keep it strictly business. Well, what happens? In your business, you got to go to a trade show, and you find yourself, you're now hanging out with that person because you're at a trade show, you're off site, and all of a sudden you're going out to dinner together. Well, you have to eat. And so I'm like, yeah, those opportunities still will pop up, taking people out to lunch, or even, are you going to let something slide? And it's like, well, they're a good employee, so I'm not going to write them up for that. But then you have someone else over here that you're trying to get rid of because you don't like them, and you're like, well, I am going to write them up for that. And it's impossible to keep that completely fair. And honestly, I don't think it has to be. I think that as human beings, just let people know. Say, hey, look, this is where I try and steer the ship, but when the waves and the wind push me in a different direction, we might not be heading in that exact direction. Like it's kind of like steering a boat. Like you're not on rails. You're floating in the water, and things are pushing you around, and you'll eventually get to the direction you're going, but you're going to meander a little bit getting there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the, another one kind of supporting your comment is that we have to remember that people are human, and humans do human things, right? Yeah. They make mistakes. We underestimate the situation. Sometimes we're just caught off guard, and we're just stunned, and not, we react poorly because it happens so fast. But don't forget that humans are humans, and if you'll just take some time to recreate those ground rules, and or have a healthy conversation. I don't always say an honest conversation, because and there's times that I hear a manager or an owner say, look, I just believe that you have to be brutally honest with your employees, and you don't beat around the bush. And yet I'm like, was that really the best way? Because I want to be honest with them. But the problem is no, what you're trying to really do is you're trying to tell them how you want things to be done, not actually that, where I might be the problem, because I'm telling them, it's your fault, it's your mistake, it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da, so that you understand where I stand and what I don't like versus, so, I find it's interesting that all these little scenarios, whether you like it or not, is where we're trying to get something for something. Yeah. This quid pro quo, right? And yet, we don't look at it for what it really is. Instead, we get so stuck on an old definition. No, not an old, a prominent definition that larger HR offices are trying to sell, that it's a negative thing.
Well, and I think it's interesting, and this could kind of spin off to its own thing, but I'm going to conclude with a couple thoughts here before I spin off too far. God made us all different, right? And people since the dawn of man, have been trying to put everyone into a tribe and say, look, this is my tribe because we're all the same. Or they've been trying to put everyone into a nation or a race or a culture, and now in business, we're trying to put everyone into a personality profile. And we're trying to say, okay, look, this personality profile complements this one. And I'm like, guess what? I'm still going to fight with that person. Like, for whatever reason, God made us different enough that we will never figure out exactly how to get along with everyone. We have to have some tolerance. We have to have some forgiveness. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, honestly, as a manager, I think we forget the golden rule. I think we forget this idea of treat others as you want to be treated, because if you're going to get after someone for showing up late, and then you're going to show up late, and you're like, well, I mean, I showed up late because I was working late yesterday. And I'm like, does it matter? Like, you showed up late. They also showed up late. So if you're going to come down hard on yourself, then you can come down hard on them. But if you're going to have a justification for, well, my dad's in the hospital right now. I've got a lot that I'm dealing with. They've got a lot that they're dealing with too. And you might not agree with it. You might look at that and say, well, you brought that on yourself. That's why you have that much that you're dealing with. But I'm like, no.
See, that's where you got to remember humans are humans.
Yeah.
And work is a component of their life. And I believe that when people come to work, they should work hard, right?
They should.
And I always, inside of my family, our saying is, look, we work hard, but we also play hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to work harder than I play, because there's something about play that resets me, allows me to be regrounded, rejuvenates me as well, that work just can't always do. Mm-hmm. So I want people to work hard and enjoy work when they're there, but I also don't want them not to be human anymore.
Right.
And so anyways, as you think about other concepts that kind of come up, the idea behind nepotism or quid pro quo, look at the bigger picture of it.
And that's a great point, is automatically quid pro quo is bad. Nepotism is bad. Favoritism is bad.
But
is
it's
it
not?
Yeah. Does it have to be? Maybe that's the better question. Yeah. Does it have to be? Is there a way to maybe benefit from it? And anyway.
Yeah. So anyways, thanks for joining us today for an edited version of Ryan and Ethan. I guess you could probably say sideline, but we appreciate your followership. I can't even say that.
The quid pro quo. You follow us. We keep producing content.
Oh my goodness. I can buy off on that one.
That's what it is. Yeah, the more you follow us, the more effort we will put into our content.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So you can, if you have any thoughts for any of our episodes, any comments you want to give to us, please send them to Ryan at learnbiz.co or Ethan at learnbiz.co. Always love to hear from our listeners and ideas that you may have that kind of inspire maybe some of the reasons of our thoughts for some of the episodes. So anyways, thank you for joining us today.
Take care.